I have some bad news. I've just been notified with an email from Apple, subject line, your Apple News channel.
Oh, it hasn't been updated? Is this Marco.org?
We noticed that you have not published to your Marco.org channel in 3 months or more. Your channel will be removed in 1 week, period.
Oh, wow. Good grief.
Regards, the Apple News team.
Oh, well.
It doesn't say that if I publish now, it'll get me out of this. Like, it just says your channel is going to be removed in a week, period. Like, there's no, if you don't publish.
Yeah, didn't we have a friend who got the same notice, but their notice said if you publish something, it'll reactivate it? Maybe I'm misremembering.
I think that was Daniel Jalkut, but I don't know. Anyway, yeah, it's the Marco.org channel. I don't care. I don't know how many. First of all, I publish my channel just as an RSS feed that I submitted to them in my regular RSS feed. I don't have any like special Apple News tags. Mm-hmm. So I think they were deprecating RSS-based channels anyway, right? Aren't they deprecating them or something? Anyway.
I haven't kept up with that.
I tried to do the same thing, and something must be wrong about my RSS feed because they always refused it for reasons I never quite understood, and I didn't care enough to fix it, and nobody has ever asked me about it. Now, to be fair, I probably have 1/10 of your readership, but nevertheless, I can't remember a time that anyone was like, hey, man, can you put that in Apple News?
I honestly would be surprised if my readership could be divided evenly into tenths. Like, I might have 8 people reading it in Apple News. Like, I think it's going to be a very small number.
Yeah, I never liked that Apple News app, and I never tried to get my annually updated blog into it for multiple reasons.
Well, darn. I guess I'm going to lose all those 8 page views. I don't even measure page views anymore.
Yeah, how do they even show up? Like, how would you tell if someone's coming from Apple News? What, they have their own user agent?
I assume there's probably at least like a crawler user agent, and I would assume that every time they view the page, maybe there's probably some kind of report I have to sign up for. Like because I don't think it's actually making a web request to you each time, right?
Yeah, you have to go to this special Apple web page with no API, and you have to look at a graph where they round things.
Yeah, right. I have to go to Apple Web Connect or something and look at only opt-in stats for people who viewed my content. And yeah, I don't even look, like, I don't have server logs enabled. I don't even have Google Analytics enabled anymore. I haven't for years. I have, like, when I publish something on my site, I have absolutely no idea how many pages it gets, and it's incredibly liberating. Like, I highly recommend anybody out there who has stuff online, remove the counters. You will be shocked how great it feels.
Or just have nobody visit your site like me, because then you don't have to worry about it either way. Speaking of Apple's websites where you supposedly can go to see some kind of number, you would think that the one web system they would have that would be, I don't know, accurate, thorough, fairly well vetted would be stuff related to the App Store, because that's real money. If you don't have a free app, it's real money traveling back and forth, and real money, usually people are accounting for the real money. But boy, they do not make it easy to figure out what's going on. I mean, maybe this is just me not understanding money. Granted, I'm not an accountant. I don't understand the world of finance. It's very confusing. But I have 2 apps. The second most simple thing I can imagine doing is wondering, in a given pay period, I'm not going to say month because I know that finance is too complicated for pedestrian concepts like months. In a given pay period, how much money did I make off of one of my 2 apps? But there's no way to tell that. I mean, they have a report that supposedly gives you an answer, but the answer is wrong. And I know that because for one pay period, I only had 1 month, one app. And so I could say, now run the report and tell me how much did that one app make during that pay period. And it's different than the amount they paid me. This is their system. I'm like, well, I'm never going to know how this works. It's close. It's like within 2%. Like maybe refunds or something are accounting for that. I don't. So I run the reports and I download them and I keep them. But it's just like, I don't understand why these numbers don't match up. In the end, the money they give me is the money they give me. And I trust that that's the money they're supposed to be giving me. But try running those reports. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's so 2 things. Number 1, I recommend using App Figures. This is a paid service. This is not an ad, but yeah, App Figures I have found is the best way to kind of make sense of Apple's weirdo reporting, and it provides useful graphs and everything. I've been using them for a long time.
But the App Figures also does not match the amount I actually receive from Apple. Again, it's very close.
Well, they have sales. They also have the payments area. The payments usually are able to derive what it actually means.
Right, but I get one. I don't do what you do, which I should have, which is like one Apple ID per app, right? So I have my 2 apps under one Apple ID. So they pay me some amount, and some of that is attributable to Switchclass, and some of it's attributable to Front and Center. How much for each app? Hell if I know. I mean, again, you can run the report, like, filter by parent apps that, like, it's in their software, and then they give you a graph that's rounded, and then you can download an Excel thing that has exact numbers to 500 decimal places, but it's off. It's so hard to just try to back solve and figure it out. I mean, sometimes it's off by a few cents or whatever. It just annoys me.
Yeah, that's why, like, back forever ago when I had that stupid idea to have some kind of, like, pay Overcast $10 a month, and then I'll split it up between the podcasts you listen to and distribute it to them. Like, I was thinking about doing that kind of scheme before podcasters told me they don't want that. Surprise, nobody wants people getting in the way of them and their money. I should have known that before, because I'm the same way, but for some reason I didn't think about that. Anyway, so one of the problems with that plan is assuming I'd have to take in-app purchase, because otherwise Apple would never allow it. Not only would I then lose 30%, but also I would have no good way to account for, like, how much money did I actually receive from user ID 1234 this month? Because you just get that lump sum payment, and you can't actually know, like, there's no way to correlate a user ID to an amount of money you definitely received. Because there's so many different exceptions, and there's things like refunds, cancellations, there's foreign currency exchange, which messes everything up. Like,
yeah, the exchange stuff is like all the things that are off. It could entirely be attributable to foreign exchange rates, because the reporting, what you got paid is what the exchange rate was at the moment of the blah, 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 if you read the big finance agreement, but then the reporting could be different. It's very confusing.
Yeah, and like the whole reason why, like, or like the whole basis of a system like that would be like, I need to know when, for your $7, how to split it up between the podcasts you listen to. And like the whole, this actually plays into, like, the whole world of big services like YouTube Premium or Red, whatever it's called this month, or Spotify or Apple Music, anything where, like, the customers pay a flat rate and that gets distributed based on whatever they listen to, like to artists or whatever. The way those work is incredibly scam prone because they can't do it either. They also don't track. Your $5 does not get split between the 5 artists you listen to this month. Everyone's $5 a month goes into a giant pool, and they just track number of listens. So it doesn't matter if you listen to 5 artists this month and a bot somewhere in Russia listened to 100,000 artists this month. Your money's all pooled together first, and then it's divided up by views. So you might think that you are helping, like, the 3 bands you listen to a lot because you only listen to 3 bands on Spotify this month or whatever. But no, you're not helping them at all. Like, you'd be helping them a lot more if you left everything streaming all day 24/7. Like, and there's this whole ecosystem of scams and click farms and all this other crap to, like, increase view counts and time spent listening and stuff like that to skim off more of the pool than what they, actually have earned. It's a whole thing. And so, of course, I didn't want to deal with any of that, and my stupid plan wouldn't have really worked that way anyway. But the reason why no one does that is because it's too hard to track how much money you actually got from each individual person each month.
Yeah. And in the end, you're trusting the same company to do, like, accounting on itself, right? It's all sort of like an honor system, right? So, I mean, and they have no particular reason until they start getting, payola from the record companies, to use some lingo from the 70s or whatever. But, like, Apple doesn't have any particular reason to lie to you about how much money your app is making, right? But it's like anything else. You just, like, that's my instinctual first feeling when the App Store was announced, is that people are going to stop receiving checks from customers and start receiving checks that are signed by Apple. And it seems like it's the same thing, but it's not.
It's way better than it used to be, though. It used to be, for the first, I think, 2 or 3 years of the App Store, you would get paid in wire transfers from, I think, 7 or so different places around the world from various Apple subsidiaries for different regions.
Oh, goodness.
And so every month you would get 7 wire transfers, 6 of which were foreign wire transfers. So depending on your bank account, you might be paying like hundreds of dollars a month in wire fees. And then you have to resolve, like, all right, you have like 7 different deposits, and it was a crazy setup. And then, fortunately, a couple of years in, they fixed it to just have 1 direct deposit, and that.
I got 2. I got 2 this last pay period. I got 2 Apple deposits.
Oh, really?
I don't understand why.
Is one of them a different the other app? Actually, yeah, it's one per Apple ID. Oh no, because you don't have
right. I just have the one. I'm just selling both through a single app because I have received payments for months when both were for sale, and I got one payment. All right, this time I got 2 payments, which is fine. Like if they want to send me 3 payments, 4 payments, just keep sending me money. It's just mysterious. I just noticed them as separate line items in my bank account. I'm like, that's funny. Why would they send me? It's the right amount. Like if you add them together, it's like, yep, there it is. That's all. It's just weird. I'm still angry about the fact that I couldn't change my company name. Did I complain about that on the show at some point?
No.
I was so angry about it when it happened, but by the time we recorded, I had chilled out and realized it doesn't actually matter. But boy, in the moment, I was angry. I actually sent the closest I've ever gotten to sending an angry email was a reply to some poor helpful person who was trying to tell me that what I wanted to do was not possible. And I was like, this is dumb. That's how angry I get in emails. I literally wrote, this is dumb.
Wow. Really spitting fire there, John.
Thumbs down.
I was angry, but I didn't want to say something that was angry, but I'm like, what can I say that's not based in emotion, but is true? I'm like, you know what? This is actually dumb. Like that is a truthful statement. What I'm talking about is, since I had just freshly signed up for, my developer account and all that stuff. I remembered at some point during the process, there was something, you guys might not remember this because it was so long ago that you signed up, or maybe when Marco did it, this didn't even exist. It was like, and by the way, as you're clicking through these things and typing stuff in boxes, if you'd like your product to show up on the store, like with a different name that's visible to customers, type that name here. And at the time I signed up, I was doing it as just me, like my name, right? And so I'm like, no, I don't want that, right? Just John Siracusa is fine. That'll show up as the developer on the store. And I did that for a while. And eventually I made myself a company and switched it over to that. And that took like a month and a half to get through all that red tape. And I'm like, and then I went to the App Store and I realized that my name was no longer visible. And if you just search on my name, you didn't find me anymore. I'm like, oh, that's bad. If someone searches for my name, I want them to find my apps, right? And of course, you can't add it to keywords without releasing a new version, but that's a separate issue. So I'm like, I'll just change the company name back and I'll just have it say my name again, because there's that field where you can change what it says underneath your app to be something different than your actual, legal entity thing. And I searched and couldn't find it and asked a bunch of people in developer Slacks that I'm in and went through all the help. And someone's like, oh, I did that. My company changed their name to this and that and the other thing. And it just, eventually I kept running into dead ends. And, I went through their official help system and got people, and I called them on the phone. All right. And I had people telling me,
animal.
People were telling me we've done this twice. In fact, we've changed our name twice. Right. And it's complicated by all the people who did something slightly different. I think both of you have a single person LLC that's a disregarded entity for tax purposes. It's really just me. It's legally and in all other ways, it's exactly me. So changing my company name to my name on the App Store is not misleading or anything like that. And I forget the exact details, but basically, I said, I remember seeing that field or whatever. And the person was like, when you're doing the initial setup, you can enter a registered trade name. I don't know what that is, but whatever. It sounds like a legal thing. A DBA, which is I'm pretty sure a doing business as, or a fictitious business name. This cannot be edited or updated later. So during the process, you can enter, it sounds like anything, fictitious business name. You could just make it up, like whoopity-doo. This is gonna, on the App Store, it's going to say whoopity-doo apps, which is not even a thing. It's just not a legal entity in any way. But once you've done that during setup, you can never change it again. And it will always be, what it will be is it will always be the legal entity that Apple considers, so when I changed from me to an individual to my company, it became my company. Can I change it back to my name? No. This cannot be edited or updated later. And that's what I said was dumb. I said, this is dumb. And unless I don't understand, because for all I know, fictitious business name is a legal term that I don't understand because I'm not a smart business person. But anyway, I was so angry that I couldn't just change it back to my name. But by the time we recorded, I had calmed down. But now all of a sudden I'm angry about it again for some reason.
No, I mean, ever since the beginning of the App Store, the process of changing your company name or changing the name on your developer account has always been effectively, you can't do that no matter what. Now, in reality, it's like, okay, if you know someone or you email somebody at Apple and you can get the right person, they can actually do it, but the process apparently is very difficult. I have never succeeded in doing it, but I know people who have. If you can call and get the right person on the phone somehow, or if you just get lucky with who you talk to, that kind of thing, which is annoying. And it's the kind of thing that you would think this would be easier. I know. So initially, you couldn't do it at all, no matter what, period. Down the road, they added a special case where, like, if your company was sold to somebody else, then like you could change the account to be the new owner, like a one-time change, and you had to send in all this paperwork and to prove that it was bought by someone else. So that might be an avenue for you. You know, maybe you could say that John Siracusa has bought, Mac Pro LLC or whatever, and try to get it changed that way. But I don't think that would work.
According to entrepreneur.com, fictitious business name is a similar thing to doing business as. And as with all these things in these lovely United States that we live in, anytime you read anything having to do with business stuff, they always have to hedge, because it's always like, in some states, X, Y, and Z is true. So that's exactly what this thing says. You know, in some states, you have to register your fictitious business name with the state. Some states you have to pay a fee, but that also implies that in other states you don't have to. So basically, if I really, really, really wanted to make this happen, in theory, I already knew I could get a doing business as, but I could probably also get a fictitious business name if that's a thing that my state supports, and like get a legal filing to say, yeah, my company name, the fictitious business name is my name. But again, I will cite, and this is not the stupidity of Apple, it's probably just the stupidity of law. That's dumb, because my LLC is a sole proprietor, not a sole proprietorship. My LLC is a single member LLC. It's just me. We are the same legal entity. So I shouldn't have to get a DBA or a fictitious business to say I can use my own name.
Objection, Your Honor. There's a problem with that logic. The whole point of an LLC is to separate.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's not the same legal entity. I'm considered the same for tax purposes. The taxes passed through. Yes, you're right. It's a different legal entity.
However, and I think this is why, like, LLCs in most states, at least, if not all of them, are required to have LLC at the end of their name. Corporations have, Inc. or Corp or whatever. And the reason why, I think, if I remember correctly from how this was explained to me like 15 years ago, is so that, like, people know, like, if you say, I'm doing business with John Siracusa, period.
Right.
Then your customers might think that the fullness of John Siracusa is there to back it up liability-wise. If they come to sue you and you say, well, actually, you're not really suing me, you're suing this LLC that you didn't even know was there, and that LLC has $1 to its name, and so sorry, that's all you can get. Like,
so then how can you have it doing business as at all, though?
That probably varies per state with the requirements of that, but I don't think you can say doing business as your own personal name with no suffix or anything. Like, I think, like, the whole point,
I could only pick another name that ends in LLC,
or a name that is clearly not, like, yours, probably. Like, again, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm pretty sure that's why these rules are there. So you probably can't just say, okay, I'm operating an LLC, but I'm going to not say that anywhere. I'm just going to say I'm John Siracusa, because that would probably expose you personally to liability. Like, anybody could then probably sue you and say, well, you kind of broke the LLC seal there, and so you're not really protected by it.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of legal stuff about, I forget what it's called. There's a term for it. If you do stuff with your company that mixes your personal stuff with it too much.
Exactly. They can basically say, like, you're not really operating this correctly, and so therefore you don't get the protection.
Yeah.
That's why, like, I always recommend, like, if you're going to have an app making money, have an LLC, do everything under that LLC, have a separate bank account that the only transactions are for the business. It has no other transactions. Like, it just keeps everything so much cleaner, and it protects you a lot better than any kind of weird, like, jumbled arrangement.
Yeah, and that's why I think all the people who say they did this probably just changed from one legal name to another, like from one corporation name to another corporation name, like, or something like, because that's hard enough. Like, just changing it from my name to LLC was a pain and took a long time, right?
Yeah.
And I suppose you could do doing business as, like, I'm just looking at Microsoft. So Microsoft says Microsoft Corporation on it. So maybe they're all like that. So anyway, it still strikes me as dumb. But I feel like the person who was helping me, had they just explained what Marco just explained, I would have been less angry, because I'd be like, oh, okay, because I cited fictitious business name. I'd be like, look, you don't understand. Fictitious business name is not what you think it is. And that whole thing about the LLC suffix or whatever, like, I could have been walked off this ledge, but I wasn't. So I got mad and said it was dumb. But then I gave up on it. So, I did the right thing in the end, which is don't worry about it. And then I just waited and waited for me to do my next app update so I could put my name in the keywords.
I should do that too. I never thought about that.
Let me see if it works. I didn't even test it. No one's buying my app anymore, but hey, everyone in the chat room, go buy another copy of my app. It's great.
Hey, me too. I want some of that.
His has some sort of memory problem. You don't want that.
Oh.
Hey, I got... Oh, wow, someone put my name in the keywords of their app. I don't know how I feel about that. Oh, it's a cool app. I like this app, so I guess it's good. I don't know.
You're not supposed to like the spammers app.
No, it's not. It's not like it's another app. Someone was talking to me about the beta test and beta testing it. It's an app that they thought I would like, and they're right. It is an app that I would like. I don't know where my name appears. It could be in the keywords. Anyway, downloading their app now. Yeah, I have to wait. I haven't updated front and center in a while, but the next time I do, I will add my name to the keywords.
All right, so let's start the show with some follow-up. I presume that neither John nor Marco have looked at Instagram in the last 45 minutes to an hour.
Incorrect. I saw your little thingy.
If you look at my Insta stories, you will see that I got some treats today, and I have been messing about with all the Raspberry Pis. So in my Insta story, if you're not on Instagram or don't care to look.
Oh, my God.
What you'll see is me taking a reed switch, which is a little magnetic switch, and moving it close to the other half of it and out and close and then away and close and then away, and a little LED in the background lighting and going off and lighting and then going off. And that is my physical proof of concept that everything, including my hilariously bad soldering, has worked. So I now have 2 Raspberry Pi 0Ws, so those are not at all the same as what I had. What I had is like the big boy Raspberry Pi, the Raspberry Pi 4. Now I have 2 Raspberry Pi 0Ws, which are literally $10 computers that have wireless and Bluetooth on them. So what I have is, as described last time in my ridiculously overcomplicated Rube Goldberg setup, what I have is a setup wherein one of the Raspberry Pis is just detecting this magnetic reed switch and then sending a multicast message to the other one, which is saying it's open, it's closed, it's open, it's closed. And then that other one will light or extinguish an LED. Now, since we last spoke, a lot of people have written in to share all sorts of completely legitimate and considerably easier and in many arguments better approaches to fix this problem. But I don't care, because I wanted to fix it this way because it's fun. And I wanted to get some of this kind of weird nervous energy out of my system, which we talk about in the forthcoming analog, which won't be out until a few days after this episode. But anyway, the other thing I've learned in the last week is that there are 4 connectors on the back of my garage door opener. 2 of them seem to be just like a constant power. One of them is connected to the sensors at the bottom of the garage door, so they know if one of the kids runs through as the garage door is closing, then it would stop the garage door from closing. And the other one is connected to the switch in the wall. And it appears that all you need to do to tell the garage door to open or close is just connect the common line, or the always powered line, to the line coming from the switch in the wall. So to test this theory, I did what I shouldn't have done, but it worked, is I took a pair of pliers and just connected it, physically touched it to the 2 screws, one of which is the common line and one of which is the line from the from the wall unit. And sure enough, the garage door started closing. And then I did it again, then started opening. And what this means is, with a relay, I should be able to open and close the garage door from the Raspberry Pi. And so I have a relay, which I have not even opened yet. But my next mission is to hack together my own completely bespoke HomeKit-enabled garage door setup. Why? Because I can, and because it's fun, and I'm having a lot of fun. And it's stunning to me that I actually made this work.
I have some design notes based on your Instagram thing.
Oh, it looks like utter garbage, and it's terrible. And
No,
you should not see.
It's not that. It's something bigger. So I may be wrong, but my guess is that you are overestimating the precision of your garage door with those sensors. Like when you're holding the sensors up to each other and saying, look, open, closed, you're assuming that the door will come to a closed position with such precision that those 2 things will be anywhere close enough to each other and align with each other to actually activate. When you're doing it with your hand, it works great. When you're doing it with the garage door, I can imagine there being up to a centimeter gap in any direction.
Yeah, that's theoretically true, but let me remind you that, as we discussed last week, when I was at DubDub a year or two ago, the garage door completely buckled and we got a whole new garage door and a whole new garage door opener. So this is not one of the like 20-year-old, god-awful, extremely loud, extremely rickety garage door openers, or at least not yet. But I do take your point, and you very well may be right. I haven't even attempted to mount these little sensors, so to speak, on the garage door or anywhere near it. But my hope is that it'll at least be able to get close enough.
Maybe. I mean, like, what kind of tolerances do we have? Do we have like Apple-style iPhone tolerances on your garage door where it's sub-millimeter precision, where this door comes to rest in exactly the same spot every time? I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, we will find out. That's part of tomorrow's mission as well. If I'm procrastinating on doing vignette, image-related work and memory-related work, then I'll be trying to mount all this and see if I can get that going. We have some other follow-up from Colin McKellar, who wrote in with regard to ARM predictions. So we had said last episode that we couldn't remember when each of us had wagered the ARM transition, if it happens, would happen. And Colin wrote that in episode 285, starting at about 3 minutes and 48 seconds into the episode, and this was from the 30th of July, 2018, we had made predictions, and according to Colin, and I didn't verify if this was exactly right, but I take them at their word. I had said sometime in 5 to 10 years from 2018, which puts that at 2023 through 2028, with the first Mac definitely by 2023. I think the context was, when would the transition start and when would it be done? John said, you had said it would be done in 10 years, which is 2028, with a fast transition once it starts. However, in episode 306, at about an hour and 36 minutes, apparently you had said you would be surprised if there were no ARM Macs by 2021. Marco was the most aggressive and bold. You had said the first one within 2 years, which would put that at about mid-2020, mid this year, and the last Intel Mac sold within 5 years, which would be about 2023. And then finally, Colin also noted that on the talk show, Gruber, specifically episode 227, Gruber had noted that he think it'll be announced last year with a transition this year. So we'll see what happens.
I feel pretty good about that.
Yeah.
I think this summer is probably too soon as I set the beginning of my range at. But I bet it's not by that much. I'm guessing it's probably going to be at the earliest, possibly this fall. At the latest, probably next fall.
Yeah, the problem with all these predictions is they were like in 2018-ish, and that's a little bit too close, because by then we had like rumors, and we were all informed by the same stories coming out of it, leak type stuff coming out of Apple. So that's the difficulty of predictions that are close to the event. We start getting some real information, and it's not just hunches. That's why we're all clustered around this kind of thing. It's just a question of how long do we expand out. And I don't remember this conversation, but I imagine my 10-year thing was like, well, like, one Mac could hold on for a really long time, presumably the Mac Pro, but who knows? Like, so it could, but I'm saying, like, by 10 years, it's got to be done. Like, what I was basically probably railing against there was the idea that they're going to permanently keep, like, one, the Mac Pro x86 or something, and I just don't see that happening.
So the other thing we had talked about at some point in the past, and we didn't talk about this last week, did we? What is going to be the first Mac to go ARM?
We've talked about it before.
No, we've absolutely talked about it before. I'm saying, what do you think now?
Yeah, I mean, and before I think we said the 12-inch, which no longer exists technically. Mm-hmm. I mean, it could come back.
Could exist again,
right? Like, it could come back as that. I think if I had to guess, I'm going to guess the MacBook Air.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be a single, like you're saying, like, is it going to be one Mac? I mean, I suppose it could. There's no reason, but like, obviously we're thinking laptop because that makes the most sense, and then it's just a question of which laptop. Could it be all the laptops? Like, I'm still kind of rooting for that thing. Apple hasn't done it in a while. They've been much more sort of conservative, where you pick a guinea pig machine, you do it, and eventually it rolls out to the other products, right? But I kind of miss the days when they would just say, guess what? Here's our new line of ARM-powered laptops. And it's all of them, right? It's the Air, the 13-inch MacBook Pro that we'll talk about later, and the 16-inch. It's just 3 computers. So Apple could do it. So that's not my prediction, but that's what I'm rooting for. My prediction, I'm going to go with the Air. In the current lineup, that's what I'm going to say.
I would say the same, but Marco's really messed with my mind by saying it's something new. I wonder if it would be something new. It could be the
I said the Air.
12-inch. He said the Air. He was just mentioning, like, the 12-inch could come back in the form of a new fanless.
Right. That's what I'm talking about. Like, I don't know if it would necessarily be the 12-inch, but it wouldn't surprise me if there's some sort of new thing, a la the Air when it was brand new, or perhaps the Adorable when it was brand new. Something
like an iOS laptop. Yeah,
like an iOS laptop. You never know. things could get crazy.
I mean, you could also argue, though, that like the 11-inch iPad with various keyboard options that are now available satisfies a lot of that need for a super tiny laptop, like that was previously solved by the 12-inch. But ultimately, like this is the reason I guess the MacBook Air is that it's just such a massive hit. It hits such a sweet spot of needs for most people being pretty well satisfied. Really, the one area that the MacBook Air really is not so great at is CPU performance. And so that's the area where ARM could really help there. Like, it's not so great in CPU performance because they need a super low wattage part from Intel to fit that chassis and thermal design. And Intel, this is the best Intel can do with that wattage. I bet Apple could do better.
And no one's going to argue against getting more battery life as well, right? So it's a crowd pleaser, that computer. Put an ARM in that thing, and no one's going to question why this computer exists and what the benefits might be.
Yeah, I would buy one immediately. Like, day one, an ARM MacBook Air, I would buy it immediately. Like, because the current MacBook Air, again, it's wonderful in many ways. It really is an amazing size. Like, even the previous one with the butterfly keyboard, I never bought one, but I handled one a few times, like in a store, and like if people would have one, I'd like pick it up and play with it, and it felt great. Like, it's a great feeling form factor. That just the size and the wedge shape really feels good, and they've done a good job with the other like physical stuff, like the hinge and everything too. But like, I love my 16-inch, and I'm glad I have it most of the time I'm using it. But I can't deny there is a very strong appeal of like a super small laptop that can still somehow make a good balance of like screen size and power and everything else. And the current Air is just a little bit too slow. We'll get to this later when we talk about the 13-inch. The current Air is a little bit too slow for me. That like I would feel that pretty frequently, but an ARM version could plausibly be faster enough to really close that gap between it and the current Pros, or even surpass them.
The other angle in this is the second most likely, or maybe it's tied. Is if you think about it, we keep thinking like which computer would benefit most from ARM, where does it make sense to have ARM, yada yada yada. All those are factors, but the other factor is like, okay, but this will be the first one, so it's going to have the most growing pains, and do you really want to put those growing pains and those compromises and have to explain it to buyers in our most popular product? And I think this is what they did with Intel. Or do you want to instead put it in the 16-inch? Just because so few people buy that, and the people who buy it know what they're getting into in terms of whatever emulation there might be or compatibility concerns, you know what I mean? To let the more expensive, lower volume computer be the first one just to shake out all the kinks and get it settled, because by putting it in the MacBook Air, their probably best-selling Mac, then now you have this thing that you have to explain to people, especially if you don't sell the x86 one anymore. It's like, oh, I was going to get a Mac, but I hear they don't run their software right anymore or something or other, right? That's the risk with doing it on your most popular computer to begin with. Doesn't mean they're not going to do it. That's just the opposite argument, in the way that you could end up having it in the top-end laptop first, right? Or put it in the Mac Pro first if the first one they make is 64 cores, but I'm not holding my breath for that.
If you'll permit me to go back a step, I forgot to mention a small tale of woe I had with my new treats that I got today. So I had ordered the Pi Zero W, as I had mentioned. And again, this is a single board $10 computer. And I didn't get one of the like overpriced starter packs that has like a case and a power supply and all this other junk, because I didn't need that. I knew what I was doing, or so I thought. One of the things that I needed, or basically in order to get these things started, what happens is that you can choose to buy, and I did, a SD card that has something called Noobs pre-installed on it, Noobs. What that basically does is it lets you decide what OS you want to put on that card, and it'll do like an internet restore in order to install that OS. And so generally speaking, you would just install the Raspberry Pi Raspbian Linux distribution, and that'll be that. And so I had ordered, a couple of 16 gig SD cards for these little computers, and that had Noobs on it. And so the first order of business, in order to get everything working, is to go ahead and plug in a keyboard to the Raspberry Pi Zero W and plug in my TV that's operating as an HDMI monitor. And so I didn't order any sort of dongles or anything with this, because I did get with my Pi 4 dongles for HDMI, and it has USB ports and so on and so forth. I go to set the first one of my two Pi Zeros up, and gentlemen, if you will look at the link in the chat / in the show notes, you can see all the different connectors on the Pi Zero W, and the connectors are mini HDMI and USB on the go ports, and then micro USB for power. So USB on the go is apparently also micro USB. But all I have keyboard wise is an Apple, like not wireless, an Apple wired extended keyboard. You know, one of the ones that has a USB port, which works great on the Raspberry Pi 4 that has a full-size USB port. But on this, I can't connect a keyboard. Well, that's a problem. And then I went digging through my drawers full of adapters, and finally I got a series of adapters that would let me plug in a keyboard so I can actually do something with this computer.
You actually have, because so what on USB on the go is basically is a micro USB port that's acting as a USB host port instead of a USB device side port. So it's like a micro USB port on a device, but on the computer side instead. Normally, the cables are not made to do that.
Right. So I was able to get a series of cables connected to plug a full-size USB keyboard into this thing, and then I went to connect my display. Now, I don't know how close you were paying attention earlier, but I said that the Raspberry Pi Zero W, and let me just make sure I get this right, it has a mini HDMI port on it. However, my Raspberry Pi 4 has two micro HDMI ports. So I have micro HDMI cables. I do not have mini HDMI cables. And what really chaps my hindquarters is I went through all of my cables like 6 months ago, and I remember seeing one of these cables and thinking, oh, that's for a camcorder that we had 10 years ago. I will never need this cable again. Off it goes.
Let this be a lesson to you kids. Never throw out anything.
Never throw out anything.
I might need that cable someday.
That's totally the wrong lesson. No, let this be a lesson to you kids. When you buy your first Raspberry Pi of a certain size, get the adapter kit with it that everyone sells for like an extra $15.
That's another lesson you could take from this. Or you could just hoard all your cables forever.
Yeah, like I know you're going to pay more for the cables and adapters than you did for the Pi Zero W, which is $10, but still, like, just there's a reason why those kits exist, because, like, yeah, the first one of these you buy, you're not going to have all the weird, crazy little tiny cables it needs. So just get the kit the first time. It's like $25, and then, you know, you can go from there.
Exactly. Now, I assumed, unfortunately, that they were the same connector. Why wouldn't they be? But they are not. And so now I have a very unique scenario where I do have a keyboard connected, hypothetically, as it turns out I never tested it. I do have a keyboard connected, but I can't see anything. And that's going to make things challenging. So what does one do? Now, Marco, you might know the answer to this, but I'm curious, John, and this is an unfair question. I'll be the first to tell you it's an unfair question. But what would you try, John, in order to fix this problem?
Hit your SSH into it and use a big, expensive $1,000 computer as a dumb terminal?
Certainly, except that there is no OS on it as yet. Remember that noobs, the first thing you do is you choose what OS to put on it using a keyboard and a display. And then at that point, you could probably SSH into it. But what do you do?
I don't know. Can you just do it by feel?
Maybe.
You could use the force. You can tell when you have to hit F2 during the BIOS process to get something going.
I guess in theory, I could have booted one of the, because I got two cards, one for each Pi. I guess I could have put the other card in the Raspberry Pi 4 and kind of like followed along, you know what I mean? And just guessed.
Yeah, I just watched a YouTube video.
Or watch it. Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that. That's actually a pretty good answer. I'm annoyed because that's a pretty good answer. Marco, do you know what I feel like is the correct answer? Like, how would you have handled this? Because I think you might know.
I think there's probably some like config file you can edit, or some like file you create. Like if you like touch a file at a certain path on the card, you can tell it like just automatically configure with this or enable SSH or something like that. That's the solution I would look for. Is like, is there something I can modify on this SD card to make it automatically configure enough to the point where I can get an SSH login? I
will award you full credit. Even you were missing a step, but I still award you full credit.
Hold down a key on the keyboard that you just connected.
No. So what I ended up doing was I used an app called Etcher on my Mac to basically reset and reformat the SD card to actually have the OS already on it. So not have noobs on it, but instead have the full OS installation on it. At that point, this is where, Marco, you're exactly right. You can put a file or touch a file called SSH into the root of that file system, and it will automatically enable SSH when it boots. However, this thing does not have an Ethernet port on it. How do I connect to my Wi-Fi, which is not exactly open?
Oh, yeah.
You can open it up for 2 seconds. No one's going to hack you.
I could.
is there some again, config files? Like, is there some config file you can put on there that says like connect to this SSID with this password?
As it turns out, WPA_supplicant.config, you set your country, you set a couple other parameters, and then you set a network, and you say it's such and such SSID with such and such pre-shared key. And sure enough, when I plugged this thing in, suddenly my Eero app said, hi, there's a new Raspberry Pi connected to your network. And so I was able to, at that point, SSH, or if I really wanted to, I guess I could have VNC'd if I'd started X Windows, but I was able to SSH in and do everything I needed to do. But imagine my utter misery when I finally gotten my treats that I've been waiting less than a week ultimately, but it felt like forever for. I finally got all the stuff I need. And there was an Amazon order and a PiShop.us order. So 2 different orders that happened to come at the exact same time. And I'm all excited with myself. I'm not gonna have to wait for anything. Oh, and I'll be able to talk about it on the show. This is like a double bonus. And crap, I don't have any way to plug it into a monitor.
No, this is perfect. The entire reason you got this is because you wanted an incredibly complicated, convoluted, pain in the ass solution to a very simple problem.
It's so true.
You're getting your money's worth.
Yeah.
I'm getting my money's worth.
What you got was that problem being even more convoluted and pain in the ass than you thought it would be.
Never has $10 bought so much hardware and software headaches. That's how to really stretch your dollar.
Yeah, right.
Oh, God.
You are keeping busy. I tell you what, you are finding ways to keep yourself busy during this difficult time. Mm-hmm. Give yourself
Just wait until he starts trying to line up those sensors on the garage door. Open, close. Open, close. Let me just bend it a little bit more. Open, close.
That's going to be a 3-week endeavor, I'm telling you right now. But no, it was such a, this is so stupid. Like, I recognize it's stupid, but in the heat of the moment, it was such like a roller coaster because I've got my treats. I go and open it up. I go to set it all up and, oh, wait, I can't connect my keyboard. Oh, I finally put together all the adapters necessary for the keyboard. Oh, I can't get on the Wi-Fi. Oh, wait. Oh, no. You know what I can do? I can use the same connectors. I actually have USB to Ethernet. I can put it on Ethernet just long enough to set up Wi-Fi. And, crap, I can't connect a display. So it was like issue after issue. I am definitely getting my $10 worth out of computer headaches, as you said. But even though this is so frustrating and silly, I think because it's silly, I enjoy it so much because it's so like the stakes are so low. Like, what's the worst that happened? I think all in on this garage project, I'm at like $100, which is not a little amount of money. Like that's money, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not insurmountable money. And I have gotten, even though it has been stressful, I have gotten incredible amounts of joy from being able to do all this and tinker. And now I briefly FaceTimed with my dad to show him my achievement tonight. And something that occurred to me as I was talking with him was, even though I've been writing software for like professionally for almost 20 years and, in an amateur sense for probably 30 at this point, I've only in a couple of occasions have I really seen my software come to life in the sense that it is interfacing with the physical world. And my first job out of college was actually, and I've mentioned this several times in the past, was writing C++ for DOS to power slot machines that, well, they weren't actually slot machines. They were bingo machines that looked like slot machines because of weird laws. And so I got to see like the real spin and the display work when my code worked and so on and so forth. And so that was really exciting. And then I vividly remember the first time I ran fast text on my iPhone and saw my software like on this device. And it was just mind blowing. I don't know, Marco, if you remember the first time you had, Instapaper on your device, but for me, it was incredible. And so this now I'm interfacing with like real world things like sensors and lights. And yeah, it's dumb, but it's so cool. It's so cool being able to see this like actually happening in the real world. And it's so much fun and such a silly waste of time that I have enjoyed every second of.
We are sponsored this week by Squarespace. Start building your website today at squarespace.com/ATP. Enter offer code ATP at checkout to get 10% off. Make your next move with Squarespace. Now, I've said before how amazing Squarespace is for building websites. Your sites are super easy to make, no coding required, no skill required as like a web developer or anything like that. Everything is visual. It's what you see is what you get. Live previewing. You can customize everything to your heart's content, and it looks amazing and it works amazing. And there's tons of great functionality built in. Things like, obviously content pages, but also dynamic stuff like event calendars, stores, podcast hosting, all sorts of stuff, galleries that you can do with Squarespace that's otherwise pretty hard to do yourself. And it's, of course, once it's running, they support it. They host it. You don't have to deal with software upgrades or patches or like the security of the underlying Linux system or whatever. You don't have to deal with any of that. And for lots of websites, that's an acceptable trade-off, even for me as a programmer. I actually just finished making a website for somebody else with Squarespace over the last couple of months. And it is an amazing transition that it was so easy. It was almost no work for me to do, and they are thrilled with the results. So not only can you do websites for yourself, but if you're a nerd like me and people ask you to make websites for them, you can try Squarespace, and you can see how incredibly easy it is to get great output out of Squarespace. And you can see without paying a dime. You don't even need to give them a credit card. You can start a free trial with no credit card required at squarespace.com/ATP. And you can build the whole site in trial mode. All you need to do is pay for it to be public and have your own domain there, but you can build the whole site in trial mode so you can see what it can do, you can test it out, you can show it to people. When you decide to sign up finally, go to squarespace.com/ATP, use offer code ATP to get 10% off your first purchase. That's squarespace.com/ATP, code ATP. Thank you so much to Squarespace for sponsoring our show. Make your next move with a beautiful website from Squarespace.
I don't need to spend money on WWDC. So I actually have like $3,000 or $4,000 to spend, right? That's how it works?
So which of the new laptops are you going to buy, or have you already bought?
No, I'm not buying anything right now. Not because I don't want to, but because I shouldn't.
Because you're not going anywhere?
Yeah, because I'm not going anywhere. I actually said to Erin earlier, today or yesterday, I said to her, I really want to buy like a $2,000 or $3,000 laptop to go to the grocery stores I'm not going to and do work that I'm not doing there.
Right.
But before we talk about that, let's talk about WWDC. There's been a date announced. It is selfishly inconvenient because I'm supposed to hypothetically be on vacation that week. As it turns out, I'm sure I won't be on vacation that week because of coronavirus. But nevertheless, Apple is hosting their Worldwide Developer Conference beginning June 22nd. So it stands to reason that on the 22nd will be the keynote. And then the rest of it will be all virtual, including apparently labs, which I'm really, really curious how that's going to work. But we have a date, and it's June 22nd.
Yeah, most of the information in the announcement is not especially new, with the exception of there's a whole bunch of stuff about how the student things will work. There's a whole bunch of like new student things they're doing, and apparently the only way you can get a WWDC 2020 jacket is by winning one of the student things that you can do. But for non-students, for kind of the rest of us, the only real news here that we didn't already know is the dates. And they did mention labs existing, and they said that it was free. We still don't know. I think the big question is how are the labs going to work exactly? That's a pretty big question. But ultimately, this is good. I'm glad to see them, laying out a little bit more, trickling out information as they are ready to, this is good. And for now, this is kind of all we need to know anyway. I mean, no one needs to make travel plans. All we know now is all right, set aside some time during the week of June 22nd because you're going to probably want to, do some of the sessions, or however the labs work, it's probably going to be time-based. So somehow get to some of those labs. Who knows? But, again, glad to see we're making progress. We're getting towards this thing. And, it seems like their head's on right. I think it would have been weird if they were all right, online WWDC, $500. And that would have been strange. So, the pricing seems right of being free. The focus on a lot of student stuff is, fairly typical. They seem to be amping it up a little bit every year, and that's very good. And yeah, otherwise it all looks good. We'll see how it goes.
Is it just me, or did they not give an end date? We're all just assuming it's a week as normal, but they didn't say that anywhere, did they?
I don't think so. And that's, no. I mean, keep in mind, this is so new. There are so many assumptions that we have and that they might have based on how it's always been done that we can break, and one of those assumptions is why does it have to be a week? It can be 3 days or it can be all summer. Who cares? It doesn't really need to have a certain ending date. The only thing that really needs to end is at some point the people doing it at Apple have to get back to the rest of their jobs, but that doesn't mean it can't be 9 days or 4 days. It could be anything within a certain reasonable range and it would be fine. And of course, the sessions air at certain times or are on at certain times or get released at certain times, but the sessions are then available forever. Like you can go online now and look back like up to like probably at least 3 or 4 years ago when they started putting them online. You can go back and get previous year session videos. You can search the transcript. You can look at sample code from previous years. So like these things have long lifetimes. So the only question is like, when are these sessions released? And because they no longer have this like travel-oriented in-person event, if they can't release everything they want to release in 5 days, they don't have to. They can take a little bit longer. They can release it over a few weeks if they want to. If some API is not ready yet, they can wait till it is ready.
Yeah, they've been doing that lately anyway, where they would make these little mini presentations when they'd have technology announcements that were like miniature WWDC sessions, right? For the past several years, those tend to be shorter, but still, that's a format they seem to like. The marketing for this one is a bunch of memojis behind laptops, I guess, inside of a dark background with like being lit by the screen, I suppose. And it's interesting because like it lets them advertise their memoji thing, but I feel like the where they have the people peeking out from behind their screen and you can only see their eyes. There's something strange about that. It's like it's not menacing exactly, but it's kind of, I mean, maybe it's a coronavirus thing where you can, the mask is covering their nose and mouth and you can just see the eyes peeking out. I like it much better when you can see their whole face, like they're a smiling person or whatever. The guy with the gap in his tooth or the missing tooth or whatever. That looks fun and happy, but I'm not quite sure why they're in the dark. I mean, I guess it's saying like developers toil away in the dark. Do you remember a couple of years ago that Apple had that video that was kind of like playing on all the stereotypes that all developers are terrible antisocial troglodytes? That was not a good one.
That is an unfortunate stereotype to be, emphasizing even further here. On the other hand, it is largely true.
I mean, I don't think they're emphasizing that. It just reminded me of it. But I do think that someone made a choice to not show the whole faces of a bunch of people and have them peeking out from behind the monitor, which is kind of cool, but also, I don't know, a little bit, seems a little bit strange to me. I do like the fact that a lot of the media they have randomizes the memoji you get. The Apple's been a fan of doing that. It's like 3 people, and which 3 people do you get? Like they have a set of, 20 or something. And they're all different, and they're all really cool. Like whoever did like the character design on them, they have variety of hair colors and glasses and, skin colors and hats and hairstyles and all sorts of cool stuff. So it's fun in that way. And people have stickers on the back of their laptops, but then some people don't have stickers on the back of their laptops. So you can choose who what kind of person you'll get along with.
Should I become a hat person? Do you think I can pull that off?
You were a hat person, and then, that got ruined for you. And didn't you get a blue one or something?
I forget. I think I lost it. I got to make a new one for this summer.
You're a hat person by default to keep from getting sunburn on your head, right?
No, but I don't mean like a baseball hat. I mean like a fashion hat. Like it seems like
a fashion
one of the options now for personal fashion is you could just be like a hat person. You could be like a cool hat person and wear a cool hat.
A lot of danger in that because a lot of the hats have existing associations. Like, for example, you probably wouldn't want to get a fedora.
Well, why not?
Oh, God. Just trust me.
See, I don't know anything about hat fashion, so I don't even know, like, why is that bad? I have no clue.
Yeah, same.
You could tip your hat and say, "Milady." Just don't.
I wouldn't do that.
Oh, God. Just be glad you don't know. Just trust me when I tell you that certain hats have pre-existing associations.
Maybe a cowboy hat? Can I pull off a cowboy hat?
No.
You absolutely could pull off a cowboy hat.
Especially in the suburbs of New York.
No, you absolutely can. A cowboy hat would fit you perfectly. I could totally see that.
You seem to know a lot about hat fashion. What kind of hat do you think you could pull off?
I think I could do like that, like the big droopy straw hat. That like, I don't know what.
I would kill to see that.
Huckleberry Finn, or like, I don't know what character I'm thinking of, but just kind of like a big stalk of wheat coming out of my mouth and the big floppy straw hat. I think I could pull that off.
And then what would Casey be wearing? Not what he would choose. What would look good on him?
I don't know. I just keep saying Casey in a dorky baseball hat. I don't know. Sorry, Casey.
That actually is like the perfect answer.
It is.
What's the Kraft macaroni and cheese of hats?
Oh, come on. First of all, it's Velveeta, you jerk. Secondly, I am not kidding. I long to get to the point that I can pull off a flat cap. You know what that is? Where it's like, I think that's what it's called, right? Like Todd Vaziri can pull this off so well, and it makes me so angry.
I'm doing an image search.
Yeah, so...
Oh, this? I think you're too tall for these.
Maybe? I don't know. But it's like, it comes up just a little bit in the back and then kind of like falls down to like being like a wedge in the front.
No, Casey.
It's like a MacBook Air shaped hat.
No.
Yeah. I want to be able to do this so badly, and I know I can't right now, but I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful when I get old, I'll be able to pull it off.
No.
Please, Dad.
You have to get like a foot shorter and way fatter to pull this off, Casey.
Why do you have to be short?
I'm saying one doesn't have to be short, but you to pull this hat off would have to be way shorter and fatter.
I just want to be able to wear it. Come on.
No,
Please.
Sorry. I didn't make your head shape. This is what it is.
Makes me so sad. It makes me so sad.
All right, now, if I were to get a fedora, as John suggests...
No, I did not suggest.
Oh, I was going to say, do I get a red one for the Linux reference? Or is that too like Michael Jackson?
No. I was telling you to get a cowboy hat.
Oh, that's right. Okay, cowboy hat. All right.
Can we please discuss why a fedora is bad? I'm really curious now.
I'm looking up image searches for all these things. Now, do I curl up the edges on the cowboy hat like some people do, or do I leave it flat?
There's so much variety in cowboy hats. I don't know all the different variety, but I do know that some of them have one curl, some of them have two curls, some of them have no curls of different degrees. I think you would just pick whichever one works for you.
Yeah, it does seem like the world of cowboy hats is quite vast.
I still think when I'm like 60 or 70, I can do a flat cap. I'm telling you, I'm holding out hope.
Start gaining that weight.
And shrinking.
That'll happen naturally, though.
That much, though?
No. Osteoporosis. I believe in him.
He's pretty tall.
He's got all sorts of genetic ailments, though.
I'm not that. Wait, what are my genetic ailments?
Your eyes, right?
Oh, well, yeah, okay.
Yeah, that doesn't make you shorter.
Yeah, and it doesn't make me shorter.
I'm just saying, like, there could be other ones. We don't know.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about something happier, except not. There's a new 13-inch MacBook Pro, which is happy.
This is amazing. The butterfly keyboard is dead. We won.
Well,
that's it.
It's as dead as you want it to be.
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, there's still a whole bunch of them still in the channel and still in people's homes and still owned by people that'll be in use for years.
And still in the iPad keyboard you like.
That's true, yeah, and still in the one keyboard cover that I like.
So it's exactly as dead as you wanted it to be.
Exactly. The butterfly keyboard is gone from the entire Mac lineup. I am so happy. Finally, one of our long national nightmares is over. We will probably never know why it took so long for them to fix this problem, but it's now fixed, and I could not be happier. The new keyboards that we have, the Magic keyboards in the laptops, they are totally fine. They're not amazing. They're just fine. The way laptop keyboards should be. They're unmemorable. You will start typing on it and you will forget about your keyboard. You won't have to think about it. You won't have to baby it. You won't have to be afraid of getting a tiny speck of dust in it once. Your keys will work reliably all the time, and it's amazing. It's the way it used to be. It's like if your house caught fire once a week. That would become pretty annoying, and you would think, I can't think about anything else because it keeps catching fire and I have to deal with that, right? This is like your house was catching fire once a week for the last 4 years if you had an Apple laptop, and now finally you can buy one that doesn't. It doesn't need to be an amazing house. When you're used to one that catches on fire once a week, if you have one that doesn't, that's great. It's a huge upgrade in quality of life, and that's what these keyboards are. They're not amazing, ridiculous, awesome keyboards. They're totally fine keyboards. And we're coming from a place that was so far from totally fine for so many people that that's a massive improvement. So I'm happy that now the laptops are finally, with a couple of minor nitpicks here and there, as I will always have, for the most part, laptops are in a very good spot. And I would say the entire Mac lineup, for the first time in a long time, possibly 2012, I'd say the entire Mac lineup is in a pretty good spot right now. The best spot it's been in a long time.
Yeah, that's true, especially since those models that never get updates have been updated recently-ish, within the last year or two. And that's pretty much the best you can hope for. The ones that are frequently updated were just updated, and the ones that haven't been updated in ages were kind of updated maybe the iMac Pro is the spot that you could quibble about, but otherwise there are really no more Macs that if someone wanted to buy them, you would have to like swoop in and explain some sort of caveats that they may not be aware of. All of them are, it's a balance of price and performance, and it depends on what you want and yada yada, but they're all basically good computers, even the really old iMac Pro.
Even the iMac Pro, like, it's a Xeon. It's a Xeon workstation lineup product, and those always have like 18 to 24 month update cycles. So we're near the end of that, but we're not like, it's not egregious. Like, it's not like super outdated to the point where it's embarrassing. If you had to go out and buy an iMac Pro today, it's fine. Like, you're not going to feel like a total idiot doing that, and you're not getting a terrible deal doing that necessarily. Even the Mac Mini, the Mac Mini is usually neglected horribly, and has been for much of its life, or its entire life. But even the Mac Mini is only a couple years old. I just bought one. I feel fine with that. I don't feel like I got ripped off. Like, I needed one. I bought one.
I don't feel like you got ripped off more than usual with the Mac Mini.
Right? Yes, more. Yes. I don't feel like I got ripped off because of the product's age. Obviously, it's always rip off in other ways, but and even the value argument, they've had some pretty bad times for value in the Tim Cook era. It has seemed like you're just paying more and getting less in so many ways, so much of the time. But they've made a couple of corrections in the past year or so. Even though the high end is still very expensive, John, there's now significantly improved value at the low end for most product lines. And that's true of the Macs too. The MacBook Air got significantly better value with its revision. The Mac Mini, obviously not incredibly good. You do get more storage now for your money, which the storage prices are still nowhere near like, what you could go on Amazon and buy an SSD for. But it's better than it was. A lot of the complaints about the new 13-inch update that came out this week focus on the formerly Escape models of it, which are still around and kind of didn't get updated. Like, they only got the new keyboard, and I don't think much else. They have it's the 2-port versions of the 13-inch MacBook Pro, and a lot of people are like, well, to get one that's good, you have to get this 4-port expensive one, and that's true. That's always been true for the 13-inch. Like, to get a good 13-inch, you're always paying around $2,000 for like a decent 13-inch configuration. I spec'd up. I went on earlier to see like how good of a value these things are. If I was buying a MacBook Air, I would get the fastest processor because it's a pretty slow computer. So I would get the fastest processor, 16 gigs of RAM, 1 terabyte storage. That is $1,850. The 13-inch MacBook Pro, i5 2.0 CPU, 16 gig, 1 terabyte, 4-port model, $2,000, $150 more. And it's significantly faster. It has twice the ports. It has the much brighter Pro screen. The Air screen is kind of dim. That's a significantly better computer for $150 with otherwise pretty comparable specs. So, like, we're not talking about like super cheap computers in any case, but they haven't been like that. That is not new here. So the value argument, if you're looking at a 13-inch MacBook Pro, it's probably not going to be a good value no matter what you do. If you want a good value in the Mac lineup, it's the Air or the base model 16-inch. Otherwise, I think they've done a really good job here. You could argue like whether the 2-port 13-inch models should even still exist. And I think they only pretty much exist to hit price points. Otherwise, go for the 4-port one if you can.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, the reason people are complaining about the lower end 13-inch, which, by the way, Jason Snell pointed out in Slack while we were recording, he was musing about the continued absurdity that Apple sells 2 computers, both called the 13-inch MacBook Pro, that aren't really the same computer other than more or less being in the same case, right? They've always used like different chips and had different performance trade-offs and different prices, and one of them used to not have a touch bar, and it's always been kind of weird. And so here we are again in the same spot where we've got this bifurcation in the 13-inch line that is definitely not obvious from a consumer perspective unless you actually like look at the specs and understand more about it. And in this particular case, they upgraded the high-end one to be what everybody wanted, and they upgraded the low-end one. Yes, they fixed the keyboard, but they didn't really change much else about that. And just, it's weird that they didn't upgrade the CPU, the internals essentially of the lower-end 13-inch, and that's making people scratch their head a little bit about it. You don't want to feel like you're getting, and Apple always does it with Intel's terminology of 8th gen, 10th gen processor, right? It's not a 10 nanometer processor, but the 10th gen one is, and it's the same one that it had before. And yes, you get double the storage, and yes, you get the good keyboard, and so on and so forth. But it's the one you look at kind of as an ugly duckling. And arguably, the Escape was also always kind of an ugly duckling, unless you really loved that Escape key.
Always.
In which case, right? And so like the comparison that I've been thinking about, and a lot of people are thinking about, is like, and you just did it yourself, comparing. All right, so how do I choose between an Air and the low end 13, because they're sort of in each other's space, right? You know, there's the obvious physical differences. You can look at them and see what the physical differences are. And Rene Ritchie in his new YouTube channel, which you should check out, enumerated, I think, basically all the changes, the significant differences between the MacBook Air and the low end 13. The low end 13 is 0.3 pounds heavier. Display is 20% brighter, and it's P3. It's got a better speaker and microphone setup than the Air. The MacBook Air has the 10th gen processor, but the 13-inch does not. It has 8th gen. The 13-inch has a worse GPU, and it can't drive the Pro Display XDR, but the MacBook Air can, which is, again, something you wouldn't expect. Like, wait a second, the cheaper non-Pro model can drive the Pro Display XDR, but the supposed 13-inch MacBook Pro can't? It's because it's the older, GPU and older chipset and everything.
Wait, is anybody driving a Pro Display XDR with a MacBook Air?
Oh, no. I'm just saying, like, this is a spec difference. If it's a spec difference, the worst GPU people do care about, because it's not like worse by a little bit. Like, if you do anything involving the GPU, which maybe you do, you're doing, but then the XDR is just a side effect of having an older GPU that doesn't have display stream compression. 1 hour less battery life on the 13-inch. And of course, the 13-inch has a touch bar, which, again, like the escape key, is like, well, is that a plus or a minus, right? So there are differences, but the differences, like, aside from the display stuff and the speaker and mic, everything really is in favor of the Air, because the Air's newer. Like, the Air's got the new stuff. The Air's got the new GPU and CPU. The Air, uses less power, presumably, with the new GPU and CPU. The Air has display stream compression, right? All those things makes that low-end 13-inch look like kind of ugly duckling. But that said, you can look at these differences and make the decision that you want about it. The point is, if you look at these trade-offs and say, actually, I do want the Pro because it has these advantages, it has better cooling, or the 8th gen processor runs the app that I want better than the 10th gen one because of thermal throttling, whatever. You decide you want it. It's a perfectly good computer, because now the keyboard is fine again, right? And it's just, you can actually pick products based on the specs and not have to have any of these weird conversations about, with the exception of maybe having a conversation about the touch bar. There's no more sort of like caveats that you're just desperate for everybody to know. But I think the fact that this one hasn't been updated still makes that 13-inch product the sort of most treacherous for the casual consumer, because there are differences, legitimate differences, like, sensible differences, but that are not obvious by looking at them in the store, because they all just look the same, right? So hopefully this weird low-end 13-inch either goes away entirely, which I would love, because I don't want there to be a 2-port computer called Pro, but that's just me, or eventually gets the internals updated when, new chips are available that are not the exact same chips that are in the high-end one.
So if I were to buy something tomorrow, which I'm not, what would I buy?
You'd get the high-end one with all the goodies, and you'd be happy, right? Because that's what you always wanted. You wanted a 13-inch size computer that has all the things and has all the ports and is fast and has a good keyboard, and this is it. 10-nanometer Intel processor, like good GPU, double the storage. That's another thing they did across this whole line, is the whole you get twice the storage for the same price, which, again, their storage prices are so stupid, but hey, it's good, right? It improves the value. It's everything you said you wanted for the past many years when you were, waffling over what to buy.
Me waffling? No, surely not. Yeah, I mean, I really want one really badly. I don't want to spend the money on one at this particular moment, but I want one. My Adorable is just, it's old. I love it. I still love it, but it's old and it's slow, and I want something faster and newer.
I still love it, except that I've hated it every moment of using it, but I love it.
Yeah, well,
I love it. It has all these problems. It's slow. The keyboard breaks all the time. It's horrible. And the one port is a huge pain in the butt, but I love it. I absolutely. Have I told you how much I love it?
When he's sitting on the couch reading Slack with it, I'm sure it's great. It's in its element.
Reading, not writing.
I could type on it. Typing, I'm sure, works fine too. It's just maybe he's not so great for Xcode.
Well, typing is also difficult because I'm getting double. I feel like I'm getting double vowels all over the place.
I was thinking when Marco was celebrating the banishment of the butterfly keyboard from Apple's laptop line, I was looking at my laptop off to the side, and I was thinking, you know what? I think I'm in the butterfly second honeymoon period, or the second wind of the butterfly, because remember, like, this is my work laptop, and it was 2017, and it had the butterfly keyboard, and eventually my space bar stopped working, right? And then I got it replaced on the repair extension program, and of course, because
it's only a small percentage of people, though.
Yeah, exactly. I'm one of the small percentage, and when they replaced it, of course, because this laptop is designed in a dumb way, they also gave me a brand new battery. And so after using this laptop for 2 years at work, and really hurting the battery doing WebEx meetings with video, and having the fan spin up, and just like, I got a brand new battery 2 years into the life of this laptop for free, and I only had to be without it for like a week. So, and my keyboard works again. So I have a working keyboard. And the battery, it's like new, because it is new. It had like 3 cycles on it when I got it. So I'm actually, not that I'm glad that I have a butterfly keyboard, but if the butterfly keyboard didn't break, my battery would be terrible by now.
So if I were to buy one, which one would I get? I would think either the 2 gigahertz, well, I get the 2 gigahertz 512 or the 2 gigahertz terabyte, because I have 512 in my Adorable and I don't need it, but I don't want to be in a position where I'm like, uh-oh.
I made the decision a couple years back to just get 1 terabyte for my laptops, because I have a similar situation as you. It's not my primary computer, so I don't need like the biggest storage in the world, because I'm not keeping everything on it. But it is nice to have a bunch of storage for not only development stuff, because Xcode stuff is massive. You always need tons of space for like the Xcode itself and the betas and the SDKs and everything else. And then also when you're going on a trip or something, when we can eventually do that again, I know I like to bring a lot of downloaded video files. Casey, I can only imagine what you bring with you. I like having a terabyte, and at most times I have approximately 300 gigs free, so like less than 500. So I know that was generally the right move to go to the terabyte.
Yeah, and I think 32 gigs RAM, so that's $400. Is it worth the $200 for the 300 megahertz and the additional turbo boost?
No, but I always pay it. It's really not most of the time, but because when the increment is that small, even though I know it will probably hurt my battery life, I just pay it, because what I'm always looking for in laptops is to get a little bit more longevity, because they're the kind of computer that it feels slow before everybody else. So I would do it. There's not probably a good reason you probably shouldn't, but that's just me.
I usually don't get the high RAM option on laptops. Like 16 is my RAM number for laptops, even though I get high RAM on desktops, because on the desktop, I leave this thing, the uptime is very, very long, and I'm leaving all sorts of huge things open all the time. Like right now, I have like numbers, pages, in addition to, I have Slack, Dash, the documentation viewer. I sometimes podcast with Xcode and a simulator running and open, which I probably shouldn't, but that happens sometimes. Forecast, iTunes, like I have so many things open right now because it's my desktop and I do everything here. On a laptop that I'm using as like a secondary / travel workstation, I'm usually more focused on what I'm doing. I'm not usually running everything all at once. Instead, I'm just running Xcode and like, Mail and Safari or whatever, as opposed to like all sorts of different, Logic and Photoshop all being open at the same time, like I often do here. So on laptops, I've been going 16 gig for years, and it's been totally fine. So $400 for 32 gigs to me is not worth it at all. Now, for those of you out there who are getting this as your primary computer and you're like, oh, I got to run VMs or whatever, like, okay, that's a different story. But as a secondary / travel computer, 32 gigs might not be necessary for most people.
Yeah, I think there's like 2 modes that you can use this computer in. If one mode is going for maximum battery life, which I suppose would be the travel case, I would get the slower processor in 16 gigs. But for all other cases, I would get the faster in 32.
And for the processor, there's also the, like, I know this is super nerdy, but my whole turbo boost religion, like, for me, like, because I usually run my laptop with turbo boost disabled, that changes the calculus of like, well, do you want a high base clock? Or do you want high turbo boost? It kind of changes that. So like usually I go for actually a lower base clock, because then I save even more battery power when I'm not on turbo. But that, of course, comes with a significant performance hit as well. So like on this, between the 2.0 and 2.3 high-end CPUs, I'd probably go 2.0. Just because, it would run very cool. I'd maximize battery life. And if I really needed to step it up for performance, I would just turn Turbo Boost on. And the difference between 3.8 and 4.1 is not very big.
We got to get you a hardware turbo button. Maybe
I just was thinking the same thing.
He can make something with a Raspberry Pi that you can tape to the back of your computer.
Right.
I would love that.
Use an authentic turbo button from a PCAT.
Talk about the touch bar is so freaking useless. That should be on the touch bar, like that, or replace the touch bar with keys that make sense for volume and brightness, and then a turbo button. That would be amazing.
So why don't you just get the model that has 4 high-speed cores and 8 power-efficient cores?
Oh man, see this is why like when we go ARM, there's going to be a lot of problems that I think will just kind of disappear.
Speaking of turbos and other, maybe this should have been in Fallout, but I got some more suggestions for fan control apps, and I got one of them that lets you manually control the fan speed, even on my Mac Pro. And I'm not sure if this is a limitation of the software or if it's a limitation of the computer. But the reason I was all excited to get the manual control one is because I was like, now I can manually turn the fans way, way, way down and just like look at the temperatures and see if I'm about to fry my computer or whatever, right? But this software did not let me turn any of the big 3 fans below 500 RPM. I'm like, but that's what they run at all the time. And it's like, yeah, they're running at the slowest speed. Like, someone from Apple should tell me, can these fans spin at anything less than 500? It seems like they can't. Which is kind of disappointing because I was hoping they could spin at like 100 RPM and it would be like almost silent. But anyway, this software couldn't. I forgot the name of it. It's
there's like SMC fan control and a bunch of stuff like that.
TG Pro.
I don't know the physics of it, but like, motors have a certain minimum speed they can spin at. I've never seen computer fans that, like from Apple at least, that idled below about 900 RPM. So the fact that yours idle already at 500, I don't think you're getting a lot better than that.
Yeah, they're huge fans. Like they're, the size of a cantaloupe. Like it's understandable that they would be going slow. I just, I couldn't make them go any slower. Anyway, I did pin them all to the slowest speed and just watched my temperatures. They don't really go up. Maybe that'll change in the summer with my lack of air conditioning in my house. But anyway, this was a fun experiment to play with that manual fan control. I don't recommend it. This software lets you like put in your own fan curves essentially and say when it's this temperature, go to this RPM, and I'm not going to play that game. I'm just, I'll let the system handle it. But it was worth it just to be able to play around with it.
Are you actually setting, like, are you forcing it to stay too slow? Because usually those programs are used to force the fans to spin faster than they otherwise would have to keep the laptop running cooler.
You can do that too. It has sliders. You just slide them and you can listen to the fans. You can just slide. You turn on manual control and you basically have a slider that lets you individually control the fans with one slider for each fan.
Yeah, but will it actually, like, I bet, like, it probably wouldn't let the CPU get above about, like, 90 Celsius, I bet.
I was never close to that. Like, I'm not doing anything on my computer. It's like it hovers. And I changed everything to Fahrenheit because I can't handle doing, even for CPU stuff. I know people get used to it for CPUs, but anyway. Yeah, I didn't try to stress it. Like, I'm sure if I played a game or something, it would get hot and maybe something would happen. I mean, eventually, like, the thing will just turn itself off for safety. But since like I was saying, since the slowest you can make them go with the software is 500, they don't really go much above that in normal use anyway. The only time I hear the fans is when I'm playing Destiny in Windows, right? And then it's only like, there's this thing about games that I wish, I've heard people refer to many times, but I've never heard someone explain it to me. But I'm sure we've all experienced it in games, that the fans spin up the loudest when there's stuff on screen that looks the least impressive, basically. Like you're in a menu or like you're at a vendor, which is like basically a static screen with just a bunch of choices. And you're like, and all of a sudden all your fans crank up and you're like, why are the fans spinning up? And I've heard game developers say offhandedly that this is the case, that like, drawing things that are not impressive on the screen for some reason make the fans spin up. Maybe it's because you can get amazing frame rates and things. I don't know the explanation, but practically speaking, it's what happens. Like, so in Destiny, I'm playing and everything's fine, and then I go to some screen that is totally not impressive, like a menu screen or something, and the fans go crazy. Occasionally, I can see it where it makes sense, where there's lots of lighting effects, where big explosions are going off, and I hear the fans spin up. But yeah, you can definitely hear them when you're playing Destiny at 4K and HDR.
The struggle is real.
And as for the theory that the frame rate goes wild, I have in software in Destiny, I have the frame rate capped at 60 because I have a 60 hertz monitor. So there's no point in the frame rate being much above that. So I don't know. It's confusing. But yeah, when these fans get going, you can definitely hear them.
We are sponsored this week by Linode Cloud Hosting, my favorite server host. Whether you are working on a personal project or managing your enterprise's infrastructure, I actually kind of do both. I have my personal blog there at market.org, and I also have the entire Overcast server infrastructure there. Linode Cloud Hosting has the pricing, support, and scale that you need, whatever it might be, to take your project to the next level. They have 11 data centers worldwide so far, and they always add more. They have enterprise-grade hardware in all of them, the next-generation Linode network, so Linode Cloud Hosting delivers the server performance you expect at pricing that, frankly, you don't. I personally have been a Linode customer since way before they were sponsoring the show for, I think, about 8 or 9 years now. The reason I first went to them is because they were really cheap. It was a great value for what you got. Over that time, I always look around to see, like, how are they doing compared to the rest of the industry? And what I find is that Linode is always the best value. Either they are beating everyone else, or at worst, somebody might be like temporarily matching them, but then, a few months later, Linode beats them again. As technology gets better, as they can offer you more for less money, they do. You can do like a one-click upgrade on any server when there's a new plan available for it, and it just gets migrated over, and then that's it. You have more resources for the same money. It's an amazing host. They have all sorts of capabilities. Not only do they have this amazing pricing, but of course, they have all sorts of things you expect from a host. Great support, a great control panel, and stuff that not every host offers, but that's really useful. Stuff like an API to script things. One-click installs of popular apps, things like WordPress, a LAMP stack, game servers for things like Minecraft, CSGO, and more. And they have this new object storage, an S3 compatible, redundant, and highly available storage option, perfect for storing your critical data. They have all sorts of specialty plans, things like dedicated CPU plans, GPU compute plans, high RAM plans, so much more. See for yourself by getting a $20 credit towards your next project at Linode with promo code ATP2020. You can get that at linode.com/ATP. So once again, go to linode.com/ATP and get a $20 credit with promo code ATP2020. Thank you so much to Linode for hosting my servers and sponsoring our show.
Ask ATP.
Let's do it.
So let's start tonight with a question from Tom Anthony. Tom writes, I'm a full-time video producer/editor for 3 years, starting to develop some signs of RSI. I've adjusted my desk so that the keyboard, mouse, monitor are all at the recommended height and angle. I take breaks, but it's still getting worse. Are there any suggestions for the next thing to try? I'm considering switching to a trackpad or a different mouse, but I have no idea where to start. I've been using a Magic Mouse forever. I don't seem to have problems with my iPad, but I can't edit video on that.
Yeah, so I think the reading this message and other things like this, I was just thinking, this is probably not medically accurate analogy, but you think about like if you have like a metal wire and you bend it back and forth, you ever like bend a metal wire back and forth until it gets like hot and breaks, right? As a way to break a metal thing, right? And this thing is kind of like, I've been bending the metal wire back and forth and it feels like it's getting weaker. And I've been bending it less and taking breaks between bending, but I'm afraid it's going to break. What can I do? And it's like, stop bending the metal back and forth in that spot. Like that's basically what it comes like. There's no magic bullet. Like, your insides aren't made of metal, but if you're doing the same thing with some mechanical part of your body, a joint or whatever, and you're just repeatedly doing this, that's why it's called repetitive strain injury. You're repeatedly straining something. Yes, taking breaks is good, having good ergonomics is good, all those things, but what it all boils down to is not bending that thing back and forth. So, for example, to use the wire analogy, you could bend a different spot. Like, it looks like it was almost going to break at this spot. Let me go to another spot on the wire and bend it back and forth. And that gives that other spot a break, right? And if it's a very long wire, you can bend it all to sorts of different spots and spread it around. That's why lots of people, like say, which should I use? What's the good pointing device? Should I use an ergonomic mouse? Should I use a trackpad? Should I use a trackball? What's the good one for ergonomics? There is no good one. Like, there are ones that are worse than others depending on how your positioning is and whatever, but it depends on how and where are you injured. If you've always been using a mouse in the same way, using literally anything else will probably help alleviate some of the things that were bothering you about the mouse. It doesn't mean that other one is better. It just means you're bending a different part of the wire back and forth, right? Who do we know? Like Mike Hurley is on and CGP Gray does this too, on an input device rotation regime to enforce this. Like an actual, like, I do this with this device, I use the pen with this, I use the trackball with this, I use the mouse with this, just like, not just like on a month-by-month basis, but like on a task-by-task basis, right? You're spreading the strain around. Now, it really depends on how injured you are, and, you have to take breaks and do all this other stuff. And some people could get to the point where they're so injured that any activity exacerbates it. And if you have any kind of nerve injury that doesn't heal as well or at all, they're all, anyway, see a doctor, deal with all that. It's such a pain. I know you can't really see a doctor now. It's such a pain in the butt. But bottom line is, there's no way to avoid the wire breaking if you keep bending it in the same spot, no matter how many breaks you take, right? It's just, you really have to stop hurting yourself, right? Hurt yourself differently in different places and spread it around and make yourself stronger and read books about it. And like, there's no easy answer. So I guess in my depressing non-answer to this, things to take away are there's like the idea that a trackpad is better or worse than a mouse, or better or worse than a vertical mouse, or better or worse than a pen, or better or worse than a split keyboard, or better or worse than a regular keyboard. Stopping doing what you're doing that's hurting you is what you're looking for. And if what's hurting you is using a super duper ergonomic keyboard, and you switch to a different kind of keyboard, it might make you feel better. It doesn't mean that different kind of keyboard is better than your ergonomic ones. It just means you're injuring a different part of your body. So don't look for the magic bullet. Get in touch with your body, read some good books on this, and hope that someday you can see a doctor again, and that doctor will have any kind of clue about how they can help you.
And I'm going to say the exact same thing I said last time we had an RSI question, which is, first of all, I have found this is not an area where doctors are typically extremely helpful. For the most part, while there are exceptions, there are some doctors who are very good and have, are empowered to do good work and recommend good things, and with patients who are willing to take the right advice and everything. But largely, most modern doctors in most, American systems at least, and similar systems are largely like medication vendors and people who will refer you to more specialized doctors who will generally recommend surgery. The way that doctors usually will address this kind of stuff is like, well, you can put on these wrist braces from the drugstore for a while, which don't really do anything. You should take this ibuprofen or something, which also, it helps a little bit, but it's not really a great solution, and neither a complete nor a totally safe solution. At the most extreme case, they'll tend to refer you to surgery, and surgery of any kind of surgery that involves RSI causes, or see also back pain, which has a lot of the same issues. Efficacy rates of such surgery are shockingly poor. While some people have good results, it's far from a guarantee that it actually will help you. So the solutions provided by the doctor industrial complex for things like RSI or back pain, not great for most people. Like your outcomes are not incredibly promising that they'll actually be able to locate and fix the actual root problem for you. So, what John said is largely true. Of like, the thing that is hurting you, you need to be doing less of it. Now, things are better and worse. I have a little bit more faith in input devices than John does as like a potential for making things better, or at least varying things, as you said. I'm a huge fan of split keyboards. Like for me, like the natural ergonomic split keyboard type has done wonders for me in this area. I always find that when I go long periods using like non-split keyboards, like on laptops frequently, I get a little bit more sore and I start having like potential issues. But it's been years since I've had anything besides like mild soreness, because I've spent those years really like regularly exercising, like doing like core strength exercises, lots, just kind of whole body exercises with a trainer and everything. It's been wonderful. I'm not like a bodybuilder or anything, and you don't need to be. And if you get your body in better shape, especially in like the core and lower arm areas for this, you will generally have a better time around stuff like this. I know this is not a very useful answer when you want something like, I want to like buy a new mouse to fix this problem, or I need this problem to be fixed yesterday, right? This is not a great solution for that, but it is one that works, and it works really well, and not much else does. So definitely consider a significant change to your fitness regime that can strengthen core and whole body stuff, and you will probably see good results from that as well. But certainly on the computer side, I strongly suggest a natural split ergonomic keyboard. I have found, and I think many other people have found, that changing the keyboard to the split type can have a surprisingly large impact. Certainly on the pointing device side, I like having a trackpad on the left and a mouse on the right. It seems weird for about a day, and then your left hand gets used to it, and over time you will develop precision pointing and pointing device abilities with your left hand as well as your right. So now I can do precise movement with either one. So you can kind of share the load between your hands. You can kind of alternate. So if you're having like worse problems in your right hand than your left, chances are that is mouse related. And while you can switch up, the kind of device your right hand is using, you can also share the load with your left hand, and that will also help. Again, none of these things are silver bullets, but it will help. And if you can get enough solutions that kind of help and pile them all together, you have a pretty big overall improvement.
I'm just going to defend medical science for a moment here and say that although it is totally true that in the U.S. especially, doctors have no idea what to do with RSI, and it's very difficult to find a doctor that does, it's still important to see one because they can suggest whatever they want, but ultimately you decide what treatment you want to pursue. As long as you understand that, yes, they're probably going to suggest dumb things like take ibuprofen or put on a brace or see a hand surgeon or whatever, doesn't mean you have to do them, but they do have ways to test for things that you would like to rule out. They can do nerve conduction studies, for example, which are not fun, but nerve damage is one you really want to know about because it's the kind of thing you can't get yourself back to health with exercise. If you damage your nerves, it's very difficult to come back from that, and it's a serious issue. And they can test, hey, are you in the process of damaging your nerves? Have you lost nerve conductivity? We can test for that. Do you have one of the incredibly rare things that everyone knows the name of, that everyone thinks they have, like carpal tunnel, which everyone thinks they have, then almost nobody who has RSI does have, that, carpal tunnel has a real good PR agency, I guess. They can test to see if you have that one specific ailment, and they can rule it out if you don't, right? They can tell you what part of yourself are you injuring and how. Now, when it comes to them trying to suggest ways for you to not do that, they'll just stop typing and that'll solve it. And they're right, but that's not great advice. And then you get into the whole, who can actually help me with this? And we talked about this in past shows, occupational therapy and trying to find a good doctor and so on and so forth. But science does have ways to test for things, and it is good to know. And for things like the split keyboard or whatever, if the thing you are injuring is alleviated by using a split keyboard, you will see relief from it. If instead the thing you were injuring is somewhere else in your body, like in your lower back or your shoulders or your neck, it's possible that a split keyboard won't provide any help beyond just a slight change of pace, and then you'll be back in the same position as you continue to tense up in your neck muscles or whatever the hell you're doing to yourself, right? And that could be, core strengthening or something else you need to do, right? So it's good to actually know, to the best of your ability, where are the actual problems and what are they, and also to get them sort of classified as is this the type of problem that I can solve with exercise? Or is it how am I injuring myself? And even on the rotating thing, do different things, rotate, so on and so forth. You all hear a story about some people have a bad knee, right? And then they, get a brace in that knee, or they start favoring their other leg, and then they get a second bad knee because now you're putting all your weight on your supposedly good knee, and now you've injured that one, right? You can chase these things around all you want, right? But in the end, there's, it's only a certain amount of bends that wire can take, and you really just have to learn to manage that. And we're not all given the same wire. This wire analogy, I'm really just riding this thing all the way home. We're not all given the same gauge of wire and the same length and the same strength. One person can bend that wire back and forth 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for their whole life and be fine. You might not be able to do that. It's a genetic lottery, and, who knows? You can't, one size does not fit all. So, so many things having to do with health, especially sort of minor non-fatal chronic conditions, it's very difficult to find a way to deal with that without essentially taking on a lot of the burden yourself, to read books, do research, audition lots of professionals in the field. Don't accept the advice of the first person you talk to. Be cautious of medical advice that is sort of interventionary, of surgery. Surgeons want to do surgery and doctors want to prescribe drugs, and people don't understand RSI. All of that is the case, but God, I hate talking about this topic because you really just want to tell people how to deal with it, and the answer is it's hard. Good luck.
Yep. All right. Jack Johnson writes, what are the tips for improving audio quality on video conferencing for people working from home? Is there an external mic you recommend for this purpose that would be better than, say, AirPods? Is there a way to separate audio input and output on iOS? I don't know what to do about iOS unless you want to do one of those completely convoluted setups that Federico would do. For the Mac, you could get a decent mic or just talk really close to the one that you have. Marco, this is probably best asked to you. What's the right answer here?
So I'll start with the tricky stuff. iOS does not expose to the user a concept of choose your input and output device. Apps can do it. Apps have access, audio apps in the APIs. You can enumerate and list the devices available and give people a choice of where the audio is sent. Most apps don't do that, though. By default, the audio APIs basically just go to like whatever the most recently plugged in, like, or like, there's a certain priority order of like, what device should take control basically based on what's available. But most iOS audio devices, or audio apps rather, will just use whatever the system default currently is for input and output. So they don't usually offer that kind of control. So that being said, generally when it comes to improving audio quality and intelligibility of how you sound, people being able to understand what you're saying, how professional, how clean your audio is as you're talking, most of us don't have a ton of control over the room we are in. And most of us are not in a recording studio. I'm not even in a recording studio right now. And, I try to make it sound like I'm kind of close to one, but I'm not. I'm in an office that's a shared use room that's full of all sorts of other stuff that has some sound treatment on the wall, but more than most people would have, but not nearly as much as a studio. There's a whole bunch of other crap in the room. It's way too big to be a studio. So even I'm now in a room that's not ideal for it. So what we need to do is figure out what are ways that you can make decent sounding audio or make noticeable improvements when you can't control all the factors. And usually you can't control the room. And the critical thing that, Casey, you were right, what you said a minute ago. What most people don't realize is that you can buy the best microphone in the world, but if it's 3 feet away from you in an echoey room, it's going to sound like crap. No matter what mic it is. It can be a shotgun mic, it can be a hypercardioid mic, whatever it is. It's going to sound like crap if you're in an untreated room and you're too far away from it. And so the best thing you can do generally, obviously there's exceptions, but generally speaking, what you want to do is have a microphone that is as close to your mouth as possible given the conditions. And you also, ideally, want to be able to send the audio that you are listening to, like the other people talking back to you, ideally, send that to headphones, not out to speakers. And the reason why is that you have, Zoom and Skype and all these different things, FaceTime, they are smart enough that they will try to not record what they're outputting. So, you don't get echo back into, the other person talking that's coming out of your computer, which will be picked up by your mic, the software tries to correct for that and cancel it back out again so that it doesn't get into an echo loop. By doing that, though, the software has to do more work to filter your incoming audio. It introduces artifacts if you happen to talk over each other, which happens all the time on video calls because of latency, and it just generally can sound worse. So ideally, you want to give the software the best fighting chance of sounding decent. So number one, if you can, send the audio to your headphones that you're hearing, so that way the software doesn't have to work as hard to cancel it out. You will still get some headphone bleed, but that's another story. Anyway. In the context of video calls, it deals with that. Okay. So if you want to be wearing headphones, and the best thing for a microphone is to get it close to your mouth, then ideally, use a headset. And all of us have headsets, generally speaking, because AirPods and earbuds that Apple sells that have microphone blobs in the cords, those are headsets. They aren't necessarily the best headsets for this purpose, but you probably already have one. So already, you can generally get a significant improvement by just using earbuds or AirPods. Now, if you want to go beyond that, again, look at anything that can get the sound to go into your headphones and the microphone to be close to your mouth. So that could be a gaming headset. There's USB headsets for gamers that integrate the microphone. There's also analog ones that have the two plugs on the outside, one headphone and one mic. And there are ways to adapt that to a phone with the three conductor phone cables that have the microphone built in. So there are various ways to do that. I haven't looked into the cabled ones in a long time, so I can't tell you what's available. There are probably many that just go directly without any adapters into a headphone jack. But there's probably also Bluetooth ones. There's some latency issues there, but for video conferencing, it would be fine. So generally speaking, get the microphone close to your mouth. Now, what you do after that, that's up to you, whether you want to get super fancy and get a podcasting microphone. But in the context of video chats, it's not really that important because, first of all, if you get a microphone close to your mouth, no matter what it is, you're going to be the best sounding person on the entire call every single time. I guarantee it. It doesn't have to be a great microphone to beat everyone else. It can be as simple as like there's this wonderful Audio Technica mic series, the ATR 2100 series. There's most recently the ATR 2100X. I added it to my giant microphone mega review on my site, which I guess we can link to, so you can kind of see how it sounds compared to everything else. And if you talk up close to it, it sounds pretty good. And I think it's like $100, and it's a USB-C XLR or USB-C mic, so you can like add it later to a bigger setup if you really wanted to, or you could just use it over USB, and stuff like that. But ultimately, all that stuff is kind of overkill. What you really just need is a decent headset.
I had actually forgotten and would like to reiterate what you were just saying about using headphones at all. When I was still working at a traditional jobby job, we did a lot of Google Hangouts or whatever it was called for that minute. And one of the things that annoyed me the most, because the mobile team tended to kind of go in and out of the office. Sometimes some of us were always working from home, even though we were strictly speaking all based in Richmond. So anyway, I noticed that anytime we did like a stand-up or any sort of meeting, anyone who didn't use headphones, it was very difficult to hear because there was so much like feedback and cancellation of the feedback and so on and so forth. Just like you were describing, Marco, that it infuriated me that these people wouldn't just put headphones on. Even if you're alone, just put headphones on. It makes a world of difference. So I think that's probably step number one, is to put headphones on and politely and gingerly and gently encourage those who you're meeting with to also put headphones on if possible, because
there's no chance of that.
One of you, I know. But if any one of you is doing this open air, it's probably going to ruin it for everyone.
I mean, look, there's a lot of upsides to everybody working at home these days, being forced to. There are a lot of upsides to it. However, one of the major downsides is video conferences are just fancy conference calls, and conference calls are one of the worst forms of communication that humans have ever devised. Because there's so much like latency and delay and crosstalk and confusion and false starts, and it's just a miserable experience for everyone involved, even if everyone's really good at it. It tries to mimic, and with video it comes even closer, it tries to mimic being in person and hanging out, but in practice it's nothing like that at all. And the closer people try to make it act like that, the more it falls down. That, oh no, wait, you go ahead. No, you go ahead. Oh wait, I was going to say, oh no, wait, you go ahead. Who's breathing? It's a bad scene. So make the most of it. Get a headset. You know what? The way to beat this: get a headset to improve your quality and your listening and everything else, and then get a beer. And your hands are now free because you have a headset, so you can use your newly freed hands to have a beer. That makes it a little bit more bearable.
John, any other thoughts?
I can't believe at least Marco was so worked up about a conference call, considering I can't even remember the last time he would have had to do one for quote unquote work. I have multiple ones per day, so I'm in the thick of it right now.
No, what it is that now the only way I can hang out with my friends is via conference calls. So I went from not having to ever do them to the only way I can socialize. And that sucks. It's way worse than in-person socialization.
You can just tell your friends to put on headphones, though. It's harder to tell your coworkers that. Anyway, my advice would be much more pragmatic and lower level. I know the question was how do I improve the audio quality, but practically speaking, in all of my various video conferences every single day of the week, I'm just begging for people to not be in the middle of a tunnel filled with diesel trucks when they're mute yourself when you're not talking. Everybody knows that, but apparently not everybody knows that. And I don't care about the audio quality. I don't care how far away you sound. I just want to understand your words. And sometimes there's just so much noise, like a constant static, like there's a giant fan blowing on the microphone. I'm like, what is that? Where are you? What is that noise? It doesn't make any sense. And it's not like it annoys you because you're bothered by noise. It annoys you because they speak and you can't understand their words because there's too much noise. I just want to be able to understand you. I don't care how good you sound. I don't care how distant you sound. I don't care if you sound like you're in the far corner of a giant public restroom. I just need to understand your words, which means everyone else mute, and you somehow have enough signal-to-noise ratio for me to hear the words coming out of your mouth. That's all I want.
Yeah, because keep in mind, there's going to be I kind of alluded to this earlier. There's going to be so much processing done by the software to your voice that the difference between higher end mics are mostly going to be crushed. Most people are not going to really be able to hear those through the terrible protocol that the programs are using. So as long as signal to noise ratio is what's important here. As long as people can understand you and you're speaking clearly and it's not too echoey in the room,
and you're not riding a motorcycle at the time you're on the conference call,
right.
Stuff like that.
You also want to avoid the problem of like I get this because whenever I do a video chat, which again is not frequent, normally, but it has occasionally happened for various, somebody wants to talk and let's talk about podcast standards or whatever it happens. Whenever I do a call, I always just use my podcasting microphone because it's configured as the input to my computer. It's right here. Why wouldn't I use it? I have headphones. It's always ready to go. So I swing it over. It's on this big boom arm. I put on my big headphones. It has a little pop filter in front of the microphone. And every single time, everyone's like, "Whoa, look at you, all fancy!" And it becomes like a thing. It's like a thing that everyone has to mention. Like the other night, I did a hangout with my friends, and same thing. It's like, "Oh, whoa, look at that!" Yeah, and you sound better than all of us. And it's like that's a kind of attention that you might not want, or it might not be appropriate in certain contexts for you to be the fancy person with the big fancy setup. So
maybe you don't want the cowboy hat.
So that's another reason why I suggest a headset is a really good balance, because a headset gives you in the purposes of a video chat program 90% of the quality or more as the best podcast setup you could possibly have, but with a smaller, low-profile thing that no one's going to notice and call out and draw attention to yourself with. So stick with the headset range of things if you don't want people to be commenting on it constantly. And then finally, I will also say that this is, typically these days, we're not just doing audio calls, we're doing video calls. And the best thing you can possibly do for video calls is get some light on your face. For the love of God, get some light on your face. Most people doing video calls do it in an unmodified office, unmodified room that usually has a big light above and or behind them. They get backlit and you can see their face very, darkly shadowed and this bright light shining behind them. That's never good. Do whatever you can to get light hitting your face. So get light, behind your computer, above your computer, whatever it is, get light on your face. It doesn't have to be fancy. Right now, if you go out right now and try to buy studio lights, they're all sold out everywhere, of course, because everyone's doing this. You don't need that. It can just be a lamp. Just move it to, next to or behind your computer. Somehow get more light on your face and get more light in front of your face than there is behind your face. So whether that's turning on a light behind the computer and then turning off the light behind you, whatever you can do that, because that will also in addition to sounding reasonable on these video calls, you will look better than everyone else in the video. You will be clearer to see and clearer to understand. You will look more professional if you have just some kind of light on your face during these video calls. All right, thanks to our sponsors this week, Squarespace and Linode, and we will talk to you next week.
Now the show is over, they didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research, Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Siracusa. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
Did you see Porsche has come up with new radios for old Porsches. So the idea here is, let's say you have, and I don't know squat about Porsches, so forgive me, but if you have like a 60s era Porsche, I keep trying to say Porsche because I'm American. If you have a 60s era P car, you might want to have a modern stereo, maybe, I don't know, with CarPlay. You know, Marco, that thing that your Tesla can't do, that thing. Anyway, you might want to have CarPlay in your 1960s era Porsche, and they have created head units that are specifically designed for that purpose. So they're single and double DIN, and they're styled in such a way that they would sort of fit in these like old Porsches. And I think this is the coolest, most amazing idea in the world.
I'm sure they're very affordable too, right?
I'm sure they are.
Well, like everything else about having a Porsche, right?
Yeah, that's also true.
This is the world's most expensive, like 60s size head unit for your car. Like it's this tiny thing with this tiny screen. Do they have the pricing anywhere? I really want to know how much this is.
I thought it was like $1,000, but I may have made that up.
No, yeah, I'm sure like owning and maintaining an antique Porsche has got to be a really, value conscious hobby.
Yeah.
It's probably less expensive than maintaining a modern one, just because the old ones were just so much simpler.
Maybe.
And they were air cooled, for goodness sakes. Anyway, I just wanted to call out how cool I think this is, because if I were to, I'm not looking to replace my car, but let's suppose I wanted to replace my car.
Casey, you're always looking to replace your car.
Not right now. I'm really not. And that's not even a financial thing. I just really am not. Plus I haven't driven it in like 2 weeks, but anyway, I let's suppose I wanted to like go back to my roots and get like a 300ZX, and we can argue about how crappy a car that is. It's irrelevant. But if I wanted to get a 300ZX, I would have to give up a lot of modern affordances. And if I could do something like this in the 300ZX, have like this Bluetooth CarPlay equipped head unit, really the only modern affordance that I can think of that I would really, really miss in this hypothetical 300ZX with this CarPlay head unit is a keyless entry and, a keyless ignition. But other than that, like I would have Bluetooth, I would have CarPlay. And yeah, I know there are other like third-party head units that you can do this with, but they wouldn't fit in. And like everyone I've seen always looked gross. I don't know, Marco, you had or have one, and it always struck me.
I'm looking at one right now. It's an inch away from my hand.
There you go. And I just think this is the coolest, most awesome idea for keeping older cars relevant in a small way. And I just really commend Porsche for doing this. And it really makes it, honestly, I would never in a million years buy a Porsche because I'm too cheap, but it makes the idea of owning a Porsche, particularly a used one, because that's all I could afford, so much more appealing, because for somewhere between $1,000 and $35,000 or whatever it costs for these head units, you could retrofit them and you would have all these modern conveniences in a Porsche from long ago.
See, if I ran a luxury car brand, I would be doing stuff like this all the time, because the whole point of a luxury car brand is your margins are bigger than everybody else. Your cars, they're super expensive, and the people who buy them, you want to cultivate fans, right? And so doing stuff like this, it doesn't really make any financial sense, and it's not going to really make you a lot of money, and you may actually end up losing money on. You just have to look at it in the grand scheme of things, the goodwill this generates. Like, it makes people proud to own your kind of car. It makes people happy with the car they have. And if someone owns and maintains a Porsche from the 60s, chances are good that they are a potential future customer, right? Because, like, maybe if that's your only car, it's the only thing you could afford, not. But, like, if you have a 60s or a 70s Porsche, you're probably the kind of person who might buy future Porsches, because people don't have old cars like that for the hell of it, because they are weird and finicky and expensive to deal with. So that probably means they have a lot of money, and it seems like they like Porsches. So, like, this is exactly, and it's why I always encourage Apple to do frivolous things with its mountain of cash to cultivate a happy and loyal customer base. That's what you're going for, right? You're not, so even though this particular project doesn't excite me that much, and like I would much prefer like the authentic experience of having the crappy push button radio, because that's the whole deal if you're going to be in this noisy death trap of a car from the 60s. Why don't you get some leaded gasoline while you're at it?
Right?
Yeah, I'm glad they're doing it, and I'm sure they're charging ridiculous prices.
Yeah, can you put an airbag in it?
No. Your life is, you can listen to tunes, but your life is forfeit. So forget it.
Oh,
they're not gonna retrofit it with crumple zones and roll cages and airbags.
If only. It's 1,300 euros on this random site I found on the internet, so that's roughly $1,500.
Do they charge a yearly fee to use CarPlay?
No, they're not BMW.
I mean, like a good aftermarket, double DIN CarPlay unit is $600, $500, like it's kind of in that ballpark. So like when you add like the Porsche multiplier, like that's not that bad of a price.
No, it really isn't. That's another thing we should bring up that I forgot to mention. I've heard news via Twitter today that Marco, you and I are not going back to buy your next BMW. because European delivery has apparently ceased, which really, really bums me out.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. So BMW is ending the European delivery program for North American customers, and I think it was interesting. Basically, one of the reasons that the forum people dug up was basically that most BMWs sold to North American customers are SUVs now, and almost all BMW SUVs are made not in Europe. At least the ones sold in North America are made in North America. I think they're made various factories somewhere in the U.S. and Canada, I think. But it doesn't really make sense. Those were never getting European delivery because they couldn't, because they weren't made in Europe. And so the percentage of sales that BMW has from North American customers keeps going more and more towards models that weren't made in Europe anyway. So they're basically saying they had very few people still doing European delivery. And so they're ending it, which is unfortunate. It's kind of the end of an era.
Although BMW North America has historically represented an average of 2,000 European deliveries annually, such deliveries have declined in recent years to under 500. Based on these trends and long-term evaluation, BMW Group will end the European delivery program in 2020 and cease accepting reservations as of this week, or maybe next week, but soon.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's one of those things that it was so. I'm so glad we did it. It was so fun. This
Same.
is if you want to hear us, we back when we recorded Neutral, we kind of ended with us having gone to European delivery for my M5 and us and the List family. It was great, and it was a fantastic trip, and it was so cool the fact that you could order a car from BMW in America and then go to Europe. They would give you this whole factory tour walkthrough thing. They would give you your car. You could drive it around Europe for a week and then just drop it off at any of these 5 or 6 places in Europe. And then they would ship it to America, and a couple months later, you could pick it up at your dealer. That was incredible. Oh, and because of some weird tariff loophole, it was cheaper. You would save a few $1,000s on the cost of the car, so you would kind of pay for the trip. And so it kind of worked out that the trip was low to no cost in the grand scheme of things because you were saving all this money on the car. It was this kind of amazing thing. And it always kind of seemed like this shouldn't be possible. How is this legal and profitable for anybody? How do they work out with the tariffs that you're picking up a new car meant for a different country in this country that it's not certified to run in, and you're allowed to drive it around for a little while and put it on a boat somehow? This should never have worked. But it did, and it was amazing, and I'm so glad we got to do it. It is a shame that it's ending, but it is kind of amazing that it ever existed.
Yeah, it was an incredibly, incredibly fun time, and I'm so glad that Aaron and I were able to do it with you guys. It was really preposterous and kind of stupid in a lot of ways. Let's fly across the planet to pick up a car and use it for a week. And in our particular case, we drove arguably more than we actually stayed still. But oh my gosh, it was such a fun trip. And yet the next to last episode of Neutral, kind of the end of the regular season of Neutral, if you will, which is episode 12, we dragged John through all of it. And it was such an incredibly great experience. And it made me feel like $1 million being part of this experience. And really, I was just a hanger on. I had no reason to be there, but the BMW people were still super nice. And it was so cool and so fun. And a once in a lifetime experience for sure, even before they shut down. And now with it being shut down, it's even more so. So I just wanted to call attention to it. It just kind of bums me out because it was so cool. But you can still do it with Porsche. I think you can still do it with Volvo. Saab, I don't even think exists anymore. So
yeah, everyone loves getting in their fun new Volvo and driving it around the Nürburgring.
Well, Volvos are fun. You don't have to worry because Tesla will let you do California pickup, where you can pick up your Tesla in the tent where it was painted.
By the way, before we leave the Porsche CarPlay topic, can we just laugh at how amazing this single DIN unit looks? This is so car stereos have the 2 different heights they can be, and the double DIN is the regular looking one that has a reasonable size screen. Then they also offer a single DIN one, which is back when cars were only radios, or maybe a radio and cassette could fit in that size, and that's it. That size, they have a CarPlay screen. And it looks like the tiniest. It looks almost like
it's smaller than the original iPhone.
It looks like 2 Apple Watches next to each other, and that's your CarPlay screen.
It's 3.5 inches, apparently.
It's like you got to be squinting at the navigation screen. Can you see anything on it? It's too small.
Yeah, because like the CarPlay UI is not particularly scalable. Like it's fairly fixed. So they're not. It's not like they're just rendering like one icon on screen. I think they have to render like the same number of icons, just really tiny.
It's like 600 DPI screen.
Yeah, it's probably a really nice screen. But
You need a magnifying glass to read the street names.
Can we just pause and look at the link that put in the chat?
So, don't give me that's a lady's sun hat. That's not what I was talking about for me. And Marco's cowboy hat is not really a cowboy hat either. It's on crooked.
Oh, come on. It's so good. It's so good.
Casey's the only one who's got the hat he asked for. And now we can see why he shouldn't wear it.
Oh, come on. I actually was just thinking to myself, that doesn't look bad.
No, see, this is why you need to be kept away from this hat, because you're not thinking straight on this topic.
Oh, man.